And a very good morning, everybody. Welcome along to the Sha Tin Racecourse once again for our special live webcast of this morning's Trackwork session here for a Friday morning. I'm Brett Davis, joined by John Blance. John, good morning again.
Morning again to you, Brett, as well. Yes, another nice day for it as well.
Actually, it's one of the nicer days we've had over the last couple of weeks here in Hong Kong today. It's a little bit overcast, but the sun is trying its best to peek through the clouds, and it's very warm again. The humidity's actually dropped a little bit in the last 24 hours, but it's going to be a very comfortable morning, you would think, for all concerned regarding track work. Of course, the Champions Mile and the Chairman's Sprint Prize, our feature races coming up on Sunday. And just having a look at the little rundown for this morning. Of course, most of the solid work has already been done in preparation for the two big races. But this morning, with regards to the Champions Mile, where Morris is expected to stay in the quarantine stable, so we may not see him this morning. Bow Creek scheduled to come out onto the all-weather track. Safety check will work on the turf. Chautauqua's going to work on the turf. We've got him on screen right now, and he looks nice and relaxed coming out onto the track. Buffering expected to work on the all-weather track as well. And Mongolian Saturday has done a fair bit of work. He's been here for quite some time. He's expected to stay in the quarantine stabling area this morning as well, so we're unlikely to see him. But we'll see how it all unfolds. Edward Sadler is down trackside. He'll be catching up with some of the important people regarding the horses who will do battle on Sunday, and we'll catch up with Edward a little bit later on. But there is Chautauqua. Plenty of hype and talk about him, John, particularly with regards to the barrier, the draw that came out yesterday. He's drawn fairly nicely in barrier 6.
Yeah, I think it probably didn't matter a huge amount where he was drawn, given that he's probably going to be going back anyway in what would probably be a fairly fast-run race. There are quite a lot of likely leaders in the contest. This is about as slow as he's gone in track work for the last few days. We've been seeing him going really, really well when asked to go into top gear, and at the moment he's just having a nice leg-stretching stroll down the home straight here.
Yeah, that he is. Yeah, we saw him yesterday. He did a couple of laps of the all-weather track yesterday and had a turf gallop earlier on in the week. And we're going to see him just limber up very shortly on the turf this morning. But yeah, he looks nice and relaxed. Yesterday he was a little more bubbly in the early stages, but this morning he looks like he might have got out of bed a little slower this morning, Chautauqua. I think that might be buffering. It's also joined him out on the track as well. In fact, no, it's safety check. So he's going to do some work on the turf as well. What are your thoughts on safety check, John? He's probably got a little bit to fight. His toughest contest so far.
Well, if this race was run in Dubai, he'd had every chance, because it's his first Group 1, you're right, but he's been running very well at Group 2 level in Dubai. Runs in the UK over the European summer weren't particularly scintillating, though, so he's an interesting contender. Good to have him here, and I'll be interested to see how he goes. It was interesting that they were talking yesterday, the Godolphin representatives, about how in Dubai it's very hot, but it's nowhere near as humid as it is here. And that might be something that the likes of Safety Check will take a little while to get acclimatised to. For me, he's not quite on the short list for the mile, but he's a nice one to have here.
Yeah, he looks nice and happy, doesn't he? Just looking at him there on screen, he looks good in the coat, and no doubt, as you said, the representative from Godolphin yesterday said that Dubai's his garden. He's very comfortable there, but he looks quite comfortable here in Hong Kong as well, and he's just walking down the home stretch at the moment. We're just focusing once again on Chautauqua, who is now just starting to pick up the speed ever so slightly. There's a fair bit of hype, and I guess a little bit of pressure for connections and so forth with regards to Chautauqua, but he doesn't know about all of that sort of stuff.
No, he doesn't. Probably good news, really. But I was going to ask you as well. You're obviously much more an expert on the Australian form book than the likes of me. Where would he rank in terms of Australian sprinters of the last sort of generation? You right up there with Black Caviar and the like?
Well, it's hard to put him in that category. I mean, Black Caviar was undefeated, so he's never going to get to the status of Black Caviar. But look, he's a very exciting horse. There's no doubt about it. And I think he's a real crowd pleaser as well because of the race style in which he's got. You know, he gets back and he charges home late. But look, you can hardly fault his career. There were some races where he was defeated narrowly, where he potentially probably could have won as well. So there's no doubt he's right up there with probably, you know, one of the top sprinters that have come out of Australia in the last 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
Going back many, many years ago, of course, Fauvelon was able to come here and perform very well in the international sprint. And there's been quite a few Australian horses that have headed to Hong Kong, sprinters that is, since Fauvelon, and haven't been able to really sort of trouble the scorer, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be great for world racing, great for Australian racing, if Chautauqua can do well on Sunday. And I'm hoping that he finishes off like he did last start in the TJ Smith. It'll be very exciting for everybody to watch.
It was it's quite something, that, actually, and it was good from a kind of professional perspective as well. It was a great call from Darren Flindell, who of course used to work here. It was a real cracking stuff. It's something you have to try and get your eyes on if you can, and if he can produce that kind of burst off what should be a fairly solid pace here at the weekend, he's going to be the one they all have to beat.
Absolutely, and the pace does look to be there. I mean, we discussed about the pace of the race prior to the barrier draw. Horses like Aero Velocity generally likes to go forward. Penophobia, of course, won the Hong Kong Sprint when leading all the way. Buffering likes to race handy. Lucky Bubbles is an on-pace horse. Mongolian Saturday as well. And then you've got other horses, as you know, like Super Jockey that could race handy. I think the barrier draw, there's a fair bit of pace low. There's a little bit of pace in the middle. And, of course, Aero Velocity is drawn wide. So it does look to be a race that'll have pace, and that should suit Chautauqua as he steadies up now and clicks up the pace a little bit. We're going to go down to Edward Sadler for the first time this morning and say good morning and find out who Edward's got with him. Good morning, Edward.
As well, and I've got Henry Plumtree from Godolphin and Darley in Australia. Great to have you here, Henry.
It's very good to be here, Edward. I'm a regular in Hong Kong, and it's always great to be up here.
What do you think of the chances of Bow Creek on the weekend?
Look, if you'd said to me 2 months ago, I wouldn't have even considered it. We thought he did very well in the Melbourne Autumn. Didn't quite stay a mile and a quarter in the Cup. We brought him up to Sydney, and I thought he performed very creditably in the Doncaster. Difficult to make up ground that day, and he made up a lot of ground in the last 200. So, look, it's not exactly a shot at the stumps. We think he's up here with a really good place chance. If you stack him up against our UK runner, Sheikh Mohammed's horse Safety Check, who's come from England, he's probably not that good. But look, he's in great order, and I know John's hoping he'll run really well.
Of course, he's from your Australian operation. Are we going to see more Godolphin horses from Australia up here in Hong Kong for December and May, perhaps in years to come?
I think it's always on Sheikh Mohammed's radar to have runners in Hong Kong because it's such a terrific meeting. The international meetings here are superb meetings, a lot of prize money. So I think it's always on the radar, but you've got to come to Hong Kong with the right horse, Edward. There's no point in coming up here on a wing and a prayer because they're very competitive here. So I think if we get the right horses, yes, absolutely every chance that we'll be here.
And what's the plan after Sunday for Bow Creek?
Bow Creek's going back to Newmarket because John wants to keep him ticking over through the summer. And he loves good ground. So we'll send him back to Newmarket where he's going to be a companion for Holler, who arrives up there in 3 weeks' time.
All the best. Thanks very much for your time, Henry. Great to see you.
Thank you very much, Edward.
Thank you, Edward, and thank you, Henry. Yeah, just getting the update there on Bow Creek, and we just saw Chautauqua complete his work, and now we've got Safety Check doing his final gallop this morning, and he's stretching out nicely. So it's interesting to hear what Henry had to say there when he sort of compared Bow Creek along with Safety Check.
Yes, definitely. It's a bit of an eye-opener. I'd have had the pair of them on a fairly similar sort of level, so it's interesting. Certainly Safety Check would probably have the potential for more improvement. Also interesting that Bow Creek's going to go back to the UK as well after this. But Bow Creek, a big advantage for him is he'll have Zach Purton aboard, which the man who obviously knows his way around here very well. That will definitely help. But yep, Godolphin have been spreading their net far and wide for the last 20, 25 years now. They like to have representatives in sort of each and every racing outpost of the globe, and I've got two interesting contenders here.
They certainly do. So we've had Chautauqua complete his track gallop this morning on the turf, and Safety Check as well. I thought Chautauqua was a little bit keen just watching him in that bit of work before. He was not given full throttle, but he was very eager to go a little bit quicker. So he's had a bit of a blowout this morning, but yes, a touch on the keen side. He was a little keener yesterday, as we mentioned, when he first came out, and then did a couple of slow laps around the all-weather track. this morning on the turf. Fairly light work for him, just ticking over. We can see him back on screen now. He's obviously feeling well within himself, and no doubt he'll be looking forward to a strong tempo, and that'll probably take the keenness out of him in the run, and he can do his thing late, which is to lower himself like a Ferrari and hit the line. He's quite an incredible horse to watch if you get a chance to, or if you haven't. If you've already seen him, of course, most would have. When he does let down, he's just a brilliant machine, a brilliant animal, really, and covers the ground incredibly well. And hopefully we're going to see him at his best here on Sunday. So I presume tomorrow morning he'll probably just have another nice little sort of slow gallop just to finalise things before Sunday. And of course, as we touched on before, if you're unaware of the barrier draw for the sprint, the Chairman Sprint Prize, Chautauqua's drawn 6, Aero Velocity's out in 14, Gold Fun has drawn 5, which is a good barrier for him. Penophobia mid-range, as we get a look at Bow Creek just starting to come out onto the track. He's drawn in 8. Then we've got Buffering, who's drawn quite well in 3. I think they'll be fairly happy with that. Not Listening to Me in 12. Lucky Bubbles drawn 1. Mongolian Saturday in 2. Charles the Great 7. Super Jockey's drawn wide in 13. Amazing Kids in 4. The Wizard of Oz, touch tricky, barrier 9, but he'll probably sit behind the pace. Strathmore in 11. And a Divine Boy in 10. So as I said before, I think there's a fair bit of pace low with Lucky Bubbles, Mongolian Saturday, Buffering all in 1, 2, 3, and then you've got Penophobia drawn sort of mid-range in 8, with Chautauqua inside of him in 6, and then Aero Velocity drawn out wide. So potentially, you know, we could have a bit of a fanning effect driving into that first turn with a bit of a scramble. And that should produce a little bit of a pace, I would have thought. Do you think Zach Burton will want to try and get across and lead on Aero Velocity?
Well, if you look at the way he won the big sprint race here a couple of months ago here in Hong Kong, I think that's pretty much his only option, really. And of course, we saw Peniophobia go across from that wide gate back in December, so it's probably the only tactic open to him. From the barrier draw, having thought about it yesterday, I think Lucky Bubbles, one of our younger horses here in Hong Kong, is definitely going to map pretty nicely from gate 1. I think Preble could let the sort of speed happen around him, just be nicely positioned as they turn. Well, we might, in a situation that Not Listening to Me had in December, he won't have to pass too many horses, and he might just be able to sneak into a good finishing position.
Yeah, well, that's right. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not Preble, as we see Buffering now heading out onto the all-weather track, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not Preble wants to try and hold off the early challenge from Mongolian Saturday, who's drawn in 2, and allow him to cross. I would think that he would probably want to hold the rail in front of Mongolian Saturday. If that's the case, then, you know, that's again going to produce a fair bit of speed. And if he's got others crossing him, then he's going to be in a perfect spot, but again, potentially in a little bit of congestion. But no doubt he'll be able to weave some magic and get a gap as they turn into the stretch. So it's very intriguing, this sprint race. It's one of the top sprint races we've had here for the season. Probably the best sprint race we've had all season. The one in December was fantastic, but this might be just a touch higher regarding the notch. Now, Buffering, he's been here for a while, and of course he is a real marvel, Buffering, an 8-year-old who is having start number 53 for his career on Sunday. And Edward Sadler is catching up with his trainer, Rob Heathcote. Let's go down to Edward.
Thank you, Brett. Yeah, got Rob with me now. Rob, a couple of days out from the race, how are you feeling with Buffering?
Yeah, feeling well. I'm confident he'll race well, confident of winning, perhaps enhanced just a touch with a favourable barrier draw, but the horse has done well.
Yeah, that was a good result for you yesterday.
It was, and I sat there right through the whole thing. He didn't have to do a thing and was handed gate 3. Very happy with that.
Where will he go from there? Will he be up on the pace?
Well, that's our plan. That's his racing pattern, and, you know, worryingly, you know, Peniophobia will try and go forward, and I'm pretty sure Mongolian Saturday will go forward as well, but Buffering's very quick. It's our desire to be in the lead.
Post-draw, who do you think's the main danger?
Oh, same as pre-draw, Chautauqua. If he brings his A game and things pan out and he doesn't get any bad luck, he's winning.
We're seeing Buffering on the track at the moment. What was the plan for this morning for him?
Just quiet. He done his last serious bit of work on Tuesday. I'm happy where we've got the horse, and all systems go.
And after Sunday, does he go back home for a rest?
Yeah, we're going to quarantine on the Monday and then back home for a rest, and maybe 6 weeks, so 3 weeks in the paddock doing nothing, a couple of weeks of light work, and then back out in the paddock and then back in.
It's always great to have you here, Rob. Good luck for Sunday. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you to Rob Heathcote and Edward there, chatting about buffering. What a marvellous horse he is. Didn't win his first Group 1 until he was 5, John, and now he's got 7 under the belt, 13 minors and 6 fourths in Group 1 company from 32 outings. It's his 33rd start in a Group 1 on Sunday afternoon. Terrific horse. You'd love to own one like him.
Absolutely, yeah, and doing his best work now at the relatively advanced age of 8. So hope for us all, Brett.
Well, that's right. You're never too old. You're just too lazy, John.
Absolutely.
That's what they say, and buffering's the perfect example of that. Interesting to hear from Rob there that it'll be their desire to lead, which you probably would have thought as well. I've heard the Mongolian Saturday connections suggest that they want to lead as well. If Tony Cruz tells Matthew Chadwick to find the front on Penophobia and Zach Purton is also instructed to find the lead, well, it is going to be a mad rush, isn't it, through the first stages? Of course, we know it's not a huge run to the first bend here at Sha Tin when you're on the 1,200-metre start point. It's probably the best part of 320 metres or so, about that until they get to that first turn. So there's time, but not a great deal if you're wide out to cross. And, you know, just sort of putting all the information together, it's hard to see it being a slowly run race.
Well, that's why Moreira did so fantastically well with Peniophobia at the international sprint in December. It was a tremendous example of gate speed and jockeyship there. And yes, one or two of the big boys in the saddle will have to be on their mettle at the weekend. But yeah, buffering has been a great story. It's good to have the connections here as well. Rob Heathcote's been a really terrific interviewee over the last few days. He's been giving us loads of information about buffering and the background to his career. And indeed, the background to Rob Heathcote's career is very interesting as well, if you read about it. So it's great that they're here, and I think from his gate, he's going to have a pretty good chance. I don't think he'll necessarily be winning the race, but it wouldn't be the biggest surprise if he was in the first 4.
Yeah, he'll be there. He'll be looking some chance, I would have thought, in the stretch. Whether or not he can hold off the late challenges and so forth, as Rob himself mentioned there, if there's pace, Chautauqua gets a clear run, then he'll be winning. They were basically his precise words. So he's going to be the hardest to hold out. But yeah, great to have him here, and it'll be a real fairy tale. Of course, he's had so many great performances already, ran many placings behind Black Caviar himself, and now he's a champion in his own right, and he'd be looking for 4 consecutive wins should he win here on Sunday. Won the Winterbottom, of course, in Perth, Australia, won that race at the Gold Coast in the Magic Millions, and then to Dubai, wins the Alquoz, and on the way back home picks up the big race in Hong Kong, and it looks superb on his CV. Not that the CV looks ordinary at the moment, but it would be a real fairy tale for an 8-year-old, and it would certainly, I think, advertise more so, not that Hong Kong's not advertised to the world already, but it would certainly open the doors, I think, should he or Chautauqua or Mongolian Saturday come here and be able to win. It would give a lot of other trainers and owners confidence to come here and think that they can win in some of the big races against the top sprinters here.
Well, we have great sprinters here in Hong Kong, and it's great to attract some of the best Australian ones. And of course, so let's not forget Mongolian Saturday as well, a Breeders' Cup winner. It's great to have him here. So we've got representatives from all different parts of the thoroughbred racing world here in Hong Kong. It's a great race. It's one of the best horse races that I can ever remember, frankly. And certainly, I can't imagine there's been a better one run in Hong Kong for a good few years. And it's going to be a pleasure to be here at the weekend.
Absolutely. Mongolian Saturday, like buffering, have both had experience here in the past, so that probably holds them in good stead. Maybe gives them a slight little advantage over Chautauqua, who hasn't performed here under race conditions at this stage. But the left-handed, the right-handed ways of going have often been a little bit of a concern for some sprinters coming here. It was definitely brought up in December with regards to Mongolian Saturday, but he got through it okay. Doesn't look like it'll be a problem for buffering, I wouldn't have thought. And Chautauqua, I guess it probably won't be either, because he has performed well in Melbourne and then gone well in Sydney. But in the past, there have been horses that have had that question mark, and some that have not handled that bend at all.
And of course, in Australia, you have that little bit of variety where you do have tracks going different ways. Of course, in the States, they have no variety. It's all left-handed.
Correct.
So that's why Mongolian Saturday, there were 1 or 2 question marks about him. But I thought he handled the track pretty well back in December, Mongolian Saturday. And we're talking about Rob Heathcote being a great trainer backstory. Ganabat Enebish as well for Mongolian Saturday. He really is a great backstory. So there's lots of little stories and subplots here in this race. It's going to be, as I say, marvellous to watch for a whole host of reasons at the weekend.
Now we've got Bow Creek on screen, just some light work for him on the all-weather track this morning. And we heard from some Godolphin representatives, of course, yesterday, and we've already heard as well with regards to him this morning Bow Creek, that following this race he'll be heading back to England. There's been some little chat about whether or not he gets out of the gates a little bit slowly. You can't afford to be giving away a start in a race of this calibre.
No, you certainly can't. And we talked about the sprint a lot, and in the mile as well, there's going to be quite a bit of pace. So maybe not quite as much as in the sprint in terms of go-forward runners, but I think Bow Creek is... Well, it's interesting to hear Henry Plumtree talk about the relative merits of him and Safety Check. Bow Creek's efforts in Australia, well, last couple have been perfectly all right, but they just haven't necessarily been quite up to the level that would normally be required for winning a race like this. I mean, we aren't going to see him this morning because he's in quarantine, but anything that beats Morris home at the weekend, I think, will be standing there in the winner's enclosure.
Yeah, I have no doubt that he's going to come up the favourite for the Champions Mile. Morris, we saw him stretch out yesterday. He looked decent enough. He hasn't had a run since, of course, his win here back in December, but he looked a little bit scrawny when he got off the plane, but, you know, we all do when we get off the plane. We're all a little bit scratchy, but he's... by all reports, eaten up and drinking well, and now looking a little bit better in the coat. He certainly moved well yesterday morning, and the barrier draw has been quite good for him too. Not that the barrier draw is a real concern for runners over the mile. So I dare say that the favourites for the two races here on Sunday are pretty much set out. It'll be Morris favourite for the mile, and I would think Chautauqua would be favourite for the sprint.
Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious where they're looking to go at the moment.
What type of quotes do you think we're looking at here, John? I tend to think Morris might be... I think if he gets 6 to 4, it'll probably be a good result.
2.5 was the exact figure I had in my head, so yeah, I think you're probably right. It's one for Paul Lally on the Market Watch tomorrow on Racing to Win. We'll get to get his thoughts as well.
It'd be interesting to get Paul's thoughts on the market, but I tend to think 6 to 4 about Morris. That'll be a fair enough quote. And I
think Morris has got not quite the depth of competition that Chautauqua has in the sprint. I think Chautauqua is definitely on ratings and what he's done so far and the form he's in. He's the best in the sprint as well, but he has got probably more obstacles to overcome to actually get to the victory. For me, I'd have Chautauqua around about maybe $3.5, $3.5. Yeah, I tend to think he might be like that too. So it'll be very interesting to see how the markets are here in Hong Kong on Sunday with regards to the two big races. So we've got Bow Creek, just light work for him, as you can see. And there is buffering. He's completed his work, and now he's standing there for the media. Plenty of people taking photographs of him. He's been here for a while. He's probably looking around and wondering where Rising Romance is, actually, because they've got a bit of a bond going, these two. But look at him, there he is. What a beautiful specimen, the Australian galloper, buffering, big hind, strong quarters there. He's had his little sticky beak around. Right, I'm off now to enjoy a nice little shower and cool down. Here he is, Bow Creek again, just some quiet work for him on the all-weather. Of course, it is an 11-race card here on Sunday. We've got a Griffin race early on in the day, the first race on the program, which for those who are unaware of what a Griffin race is, it's basically a race for young horses. There's a whole heap of 3-year-olds and 4, in fact, and 3 2-year-olds that'll be doing battle in the first race of the day, which is over the straight 1,000 metres. The 2 features on the afternoon on the 11-race card are races 7 and 8. The 7th is the Chairman's Sprint Prize and the 8th is the Champions Mile. So the sprint will be up first and then the mile to follow. Get here early, I think, would be the best piece of advice I can give you, because I remember International Day back in December. That MTR station can get somewhat packed as the patrons come in, and so you're going to be getting here and sampling the atmosphere as soon as possible.
Yes, on an 11-race card. Let's touch a little bit, John, on potentially the weather for the program. It's obviously an important element of racing. We saw it have its say here on the weekend just gone by with, of course, the QE2 Cup. We had a lot of rain prior. The day or the night before the race meeting was actually quite dry, and then on race day we had all seasons throughout the day. It poured down for race 4, it was dry again then for race 5, and then when the feature came up the sun was out, but there was already some damage done. We went from good to yielding, ended up on a yielding. Now looking at the radar, today it's meant to be fine and warm, so there wouldn't be any dampness in the track, I wouldn't have thought, at the end of today. I think a good surface will be expected. Tomorrow, overcast, not a huge amount of showers expected, but Sunday, looking at the weather app, there's a little lightning bolt in that dark cloud. So obviously hard to predict, but we hope it stays away.
Yeah, well, many will know that a bit like Chautauqua and buffering et al. I've been acclimatising here in Hong Kong as well over the last few months, and it's this time of the year it's pretty unstable, the weather. It can be sort of very hot and sunny, but then you're never too far away from a shower, and as we've suggested before, if that shower is heavy and happens during racing, it can have an effect on the ground. But if the rain occurs in the morning and you get nothing else throughout the afternoon, it can dry up very quickly as well. So it's if you're watching from foreign climes here and want to be thinking about how the track will ride, it probably will ride pretty good unless there is a kind of monsoon prior to races 7 and 8 at the weekend. That's
right. And as you said, if we get some rain actually when a race is on, then it can get cut up as well. It was interesting here last weekend. The rail was in the true position, the A course. It'll be moved out 3 metres for the meeting coming up on Sunday. So the rail will be in the B position. So it's sort of that inside part that was cut up last weekend has now been pushed back. It's out of play. It was interesting to note as well, John, last week. I thought, you know, we sort of went through a first few races, and then some of the jockeys started to pull wide. We saw 1 or 2 winners come down the outside, and I think most of the jockeys sort of had in their mind at that stage that you wanted to be away from the rail and sort of headed to that middle part of the track. But then at the end of the day, and even in Werther's race, we saw Hugh Bowman pinch rails runs. Admittedly, he wasn't right on the rail, but he was closer to the inside rail than the outside. And then in the last race as well, Bellini did pretty much the same thing. It was a real carbon copy. So it's going to be very interesting to see, again, the decisions that the jockeys make with regards to where they want to head. But rail in the B position for the 11 race card on Sunday. So that's pretty much all we can tell you. We can't predict the weather. No one can. Not even the weatherman. And that's the proof has been in the pudding for years with regards to that. They do a great job in trying to estimate it, but it's a very hard thing to get right.
Especially not at this time of the year. It's not easy at all.
Yeah, of course, the tropics here in Hong Kong, we are getting, you know, the rainstorms and that blowing through on a quite a regular basis. We haven't seen the sun here in Hong Kong on a regular basis for probably 5 or 6 weeks. We've just had overcast and thunderstorm days. Anyway, most of the work is completed now. We've seen Chautauqua, obviously. We've seen buffering. We've continually been watching Bow Creek. We've also seen Safety Check have his turf gallop this morning. As I mentioned earlier, Morris not coming out this morning, just heading out in the quarantine stable. The same can be said for Mongolian Saturday. So basically most of the work has been completed this morning. So just winding down things here for our final morning of the live webcast of Trackwork. Hopefully it's been informative for you and given you an update on how your horse, the one you are following most closely, is progressing. I think most trainers and owners and jockeys are reasonably happy with the way things have gone.
Yeah, I think, and of course the fantastic facilities here at Chart Inn, and the horses are very nicely looked after and beautifully prepared for what, as we said before, should be a really stellar day's racing. I'm really looking forward to it.
All right, we're just looking out to see whether anything else is happening. Just having a quick look through the binoculars here to see if I can capture Morris, and at this stage can't see him heading on to either the all-weather or to the turf, so he is going to stay in the quarantine stabling area and probably have a light walk around there. It looks like Mongolian Saturday will be doing the same. Edward Sadler has done a great job down there catching up with many people over the last week or so. Of course, we had the live webcast last week on Thursday and Friday, and we've had it again yesterday and today. And hopefully it's been something enjoyable for you listening or watching around the world. And it's all set and ready to go now, John. It's just about tomorrow morning, some light exercise, I would think, for most, and then race day on Sunday. What's the tip for the Champions Mile? Firstly, the early tip from John Blantz.
Morris, definitely. I think he's 6 wins in a row. I think it could be a very good chance he'll make it 7. So yeah, that's the one for me.
And the sprint?
I think Chautauqua will win, but I like to say I'm warming towards Lucky Bubbles each way.
All right, yeah, I'm a bit like you. I'm going to be tipping Chautauqua, but Lucky Bubbles will be in for second, and I'll probably have the Wizard of Oz in there as well.
Yeah.
I think he's another nice 4-year-old on the way up. And yeah, for the mild, it'll be Morris for me. But I'll be very interested to see how Contentment measures up against him, and Giant Treasure as well. I mean, we saw Giant Treasure run a good race back in December, and Contentment certainly is at the peak of his powers at the moment, had that excuse last start. So 2 fantastic races coming up on Sunday. On behalf of all the team behind the scenes, Edward Sadler, John Blantz and myself, we hope we've enjoyed everything here at Sha Tin with regarding our live web performance. And we've got Tony the Pigeon joining us here, so we better...
Probably our cue to leave, really.
We better get moving, John, yes. Good morning, everybody, and all the best on Sunday.
Goodbye.